how did that transition, like, kind of walk me through how you go from the Planned Parenthood beginning type of
Yeah,
work
yeah.
to where you've gotten now, where you're at the Boys and Girls Club? Like, how did that progress happen for you?
So I used to live at Moody. They used to call them Moody Projects or North Canal Apartments, and at the time I was doing Planned Parenthood, and there was a community organizer that knocked on our door and basically said, "Hey, they're gonna shut down where you live, and they're gonna basically tear it up and make condos." And they asked my mom. They said, "Hey, would you be willing to go out and kind of talk to other people and let them know what's happening?" And so basically I was watching her knocking on doors and having people come to our house. And that was just another level of like, I want to do some of this, right? And so it was I actually reached out to CBA, Coalition for a Better Acre, which is a huge agency here in Lowell. And and they recruited me as their youth organizer. And so
So how old were you at this point?
I was probably, I want to say maybe
Late teens?
16,
Yeah,
maybe
okay.
15,
Maybe teen,
16.
okay, okay.
Yeah. But again, I was knocking on doors and the idea, and I was attached to an actual community organizer, right? Like it was me, almost kind of like apprenticeship kind of situation. And I would knock on doors and people would welcome us in, and they'd give us little treats. And but what I learned was that there were so many people that had some of the same concerns, and they were sharing the same kind of fears. And the biggest thing is that they needed that place, right? They needed somewhere to live. And so that was my first time actually doing an organizing campaign where we worked with the community to basically buy North Carolina apartments from HUD for $1. And so it's so that no matter what happened, it would always stay as affordable housing for folks, which I love because every time I drive by, now I know that I was a part of that. And I know that, for me, it's funny because people say, oh, you lived in Moody Projects. And I'm like, I loved it. I mean, everybody knew our business, but it was kind of like that whole theme of like it takes a village to raise people, and but I loved it. I to this day I still have friends that were from that community. So, and so from there, I ended up going to I now at this point I was looking for work, and they were looking for a street worker, and I had reached out to this woman that was doing street work and working on the street, and I had told her some of the stuff that I had done, and she had said to me, "Well, what if you were one of the street workers in partnership with the Boys and Girls Club? What do you think?" And so I said, yeah, I think it'd be great. What she forgot to mention was that it was all specifically to be around gang involved youth. And so I had no experience. I remember me asking, I was like, once I was the first day on the job, I'm like, how am I supposed to connect? Like, how's this gonna work? And she's like, you're fine. You live in Moody. I'm sure you'll connect with people. And I was like, no, that's not how it works. But the great thing was, honestly, she left me. I remember, I'll never forget this day. She left me at North Common Park actually, and everybody was playing basketball. I don't know how to play basketball, and I was trying to figure out how I'm gonna get in there and connect to folks. And so I did what I always do, which is comedy, right? So I walked in, and I was watching them for a little bit. They were like, "Who's this kid?" And at one point, I stopped them and I go, "Hey, listen, if you want someone to teach you how to really play basketball, like I've been trained all over." I came up with this whole story, and they're like, "Oh, really? Okay." And then they started watching me play, and they died laughing. But it broke the ice, right? Like it got them to go. What? I was like, "Wait, these are European skills I'm trying to show you here." So we got talking, and then what happened was that it opened the door for me to just learn more about what they needed.
Hmm.
And then once I came through and helped them out with like, hey, this is what you needed, then they started building the trust and they started connecting me to other young people. Um, and honestly, that's how UTEC was born. We had there was a lot of
Because
gang
you were
violence.
early stages UTEC from what
Oh,
I,
I was one of the founders. Yeah,
oh, okay, all
yeah,
right, yeah.
yeah. One of the five founders. And so there was a lot of gang violence happening in Lowell, like specifically between Latinos and Southeast Asians. And to me, I remember it getting so bad because I would go to visit my grandmother and she would have stories about like, oh, I'm scared to go out and something's gonna happen to me. And I remember thinking, I'm like, wow, this is in people's homes. Like people are
Mm.
talking about this. Um, and so we all got together and we rallied a lot of young people and we said, you know, what is it that you guys want to see? Like, how do we address this situation? And at the time, downtown Lowell was considered a neutral zone. One, because it has a lot of cops there. There was a lot of businesses. So no one really came downtown to kind of do any
Start
kind of,
trouble. Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yeah, that
yeah.
kind of thing. So we were like, all right. They wanted a youth center. So we started looking around. St. Anne's Church, at the time, they had a whole building that they weren't even utilizing.
Was that the one right next to Lowell High?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
I
That's
remember
right.
those. I went there.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Salsa classes.
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah, I
Yeah, yeah.
remember.
So we approached the pastor at the time and we said to him, you know, would you be interested? And the funny thing is he said no because it was kids, right? Like I was like maybe 18, 19 years old at this point. And so we ended up teaming up with some adults and or what they would consider adults. We had the meeting again and they said yes. And then this time we basically said to them, hey, can we use this? There was like 4 rooms. Can we take over these 4 rooms? And they were like all over it. We had some rent. We wrote our first grant, which that was a new experience for me to write a grant. We got the grant. So we were pretty much good for about 6 months. And then we had to figure out how are we going to sustain this. And so I remember we did a flyer and the whole thing was like, come see UTEC, come check it out. At the time it wasn't even called UTEC yet, but we would come check us out. And we had 300 young people show up.
That's
Like
awesome.
it was packed.
That's awesome.
And the hard part about it is that we had nothing planned. Other than, like, we thought we would have got maybe like 15, 20, 300 showed up. There was no basketball courts. There was no games, nothing. And we decided to divide everybody up into small groups. And we just started having focus groups. And honestly, all we did was listen. We just took flip chart paper and just kept asking, what do you want this place to look like? Everything from, that's how we got the name, which was called at the time United Teen Equality Center. They came up with it. We started talking about what kind of programs you want. They created the programs. And we had such a like an eclectic kind of thing because it was like Soups On, which did cooking. We had capoeira. We had some jiu-jitsu in there as well. We had like salsa classes. Like everything was so, for me, very culturally diverse. And I think that was one of the reasons why the kids loved it because it was something that they weren't seeing. Um, and then, you know, we had some computer classes. And ultimately from there, we, unfortunately, the story was that we were there probably about, I want to say maybe 4 or 5 years before the new pastor came in. And he just had a different direction for what he wanted to use that space. And we hadn't even thought about the idea of like, oh, because we didn't own it. I was like, what happens now, right? And so we did what we've always done, right? We turned to the community and we said to folks, help us find out where do we go? Like, how do we find our new home? And as a temporary measure, we ended up moving to downtown Lowell on Merrimack Street. And it was kind of cool because even though we were sad to lose the space that we were in, we had all the young people help us move and set up the new space. And so there was this transition of making sure that the same kind of feeling that you had at the original UTEC, you would get at this new place. And we had 2 floors, but even there, we were met with some resistance because as soon as we moved in, there was an article in the newspaper that basically said, UTEC increases crime in downtown Lowell. And we were like, wait, what? We just got here. It's like, and so we were disappointed to see that because a lot of it was perception, right? There was a lot of young people in downtown and there were folks that are walking and assuming the worst. So again, we were like, how do we handle this? And we turned to each other, we turned to the young people.
And this is like pre-social media, really.
Oh,
so like
yeah, this was all
you're trying to,
flyers.
you're
We
trying
were
to
knocking
like,
doors.
yeah,
There was not even,
yeah.
we weren't even, I think AOL was still a thing. So this is back in the day.
Right.
But what was great about it is that the kids were like, why don't we just invite them? Why don't we invite them to come meet us? And I love that idea because even in the gang intervention work that I've done, every single time that we've built relationships with another group, it changes. It's so much harder for you to attack or have a problem with somebody once you know their story, once you know who they are, once you've built those relationships. And so we did the same thing. We're like, well, let's do the same thing with the businesses. So we invited them all. We cooked them an amazing dinner for them, and we did a whole circle. And we asked them, "What are you fearful of?" And a lot of it was, well, you're all wearing black jackets, and we weren't sure if that meant that everybody was in a gang. And we're like, no, it's just a style. We're all wearing black, it's cold. But the kids actually started thinking about, okay. And then when you were walking by, some of the folks were saying, I'm nervous when I walk by because folks don't move. So you're seeing the young people actually saying to other young people, hey, listen, when we see our neighbors coming through, let's just give them some space so that they don't feel uncomfortable. We were saying hi more to people. They were saying hi to us. It just changed the
Mm.
dynamic. And we also recognize this is not where we want to be for the rest of our, the duration of UTEC. So we asked them, help us find a home that we own. And that kind of stirred this whole conversation of people picking up the phone and just saying, hey, where's UTEC's new home? Um, and it took a while, but St. Anne's Church, which is where UTEC is right now, was also closing. I mean, I feel like things were all aligned. I mean, and we were there for about 2 years, but they reached out to us and said, would this be something that you guys would be interested in? We did a tour and it needed work, but we fell in love with it. We were like, we could envision all the different things. And then the best part is that we owned it. So no matter what happened, no one was going to ask us to leave, right? It was like, this is a permanent home for all of us. And again, the same thing. We had it was 340 young people march through downtown to our new home. And that was our way of just kind of celebrating that, yes, we're leaving downtown, but we now have our new place. And they helped us remodel the place. We created programming that was connected to construction and making sure that it made sense so that young people were getting credit.
Mm.
Um, so what started off as a drop-in center turned into what it is today, right? It's job opportunities. You can get your high school or GED or high set now, what they call high set. Um, it gives an opportunity for individuals that are like coming out of incarceration a second chance. I mean, for me, one of the things I love is, again, Lowell to me is like a special place because at every corner there's something that I can like look at and go, wow, this is hopefully gonna be there way after I'm gone.
Mm.
And so UTEC is one of those places. I see all these young people that I bump into, and they're saying UTEC Nation, UTEC Nation. Um, and it just brings me so much pride because I know what that means, and I also know the work that they have to do to kind of get to where they are, right? Um, and I don't take that for granted because for me, I think most people don't understand that when someone decides to say, I'm going to have you be a part of my journey, that's a huge step, right? It's not something that people just do in a whim, right? Especially if you've had some hard times, right? You kind of feel guarded.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be able to see these young people choose, because they don't have to go to UTEC, to choose to go to UTEC, to trust the staff at UTEC, to make sure that they're taking what they thought life had handed them and changing that into something else, you can't beat it, right? So yeah, I was there for 16 years, and then I probably would have been there to this day, except that I started thinking about another problem that not just our community but other communities have is the homeless population. And I kept thinking, I was like, wow, we've covered work, we've covered education, we've covered a place for folks to kind of socialize, but all of that doesn't work if you are cold, if you don't have a place to go home and sleep. And so I started talking to UTEC and saying, hey, I've been here 16 years, but I think I want to break out and start a homeless shelter for teens. And that kind of started the conversation. It took me about 3 or 4 years to kind of really leave. Um, and then finally, when I left, I actually created a plan. I ended up giving that plan to another organization to execute, which was executed in the city. Because at the time, the Boys and Girls Club reached out to me and said, "Hey, we have somebody that's on maternity leave. Would you be okay with coming in and covering that person?" And I thought to myself, I'm like, you know what? Why not? Um, and within a month, Joe, who's the executive director, said to me, "Would you be interested in being the number two in our organization?" And at first, I actually thought, I was like, do I want to do that? But honestly, I fell in love with I've always worked with teens. And so to be able to now work and make an impact with kids that are like 8 years old, that was really interesting to me. And it was a whole different ball game because I had little kids like in my office crying, and I'm like, "What happened?" And I'm immediately thinking it's like major crisis. And he's like, "He stole my Pokemon card." And I'm like, I could deal with this. I feel you. I feel you, because that would bother me too.
Yeah, right.
And and it also gave me an opportunity to be able to kind of showcase some of the stuff that I love, right? I'm a big Marvel fan. I'm a big DC fan.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah.
So anime. And so I
Mhm.
have an opportunity to just be able to talk to young people about things that are important to them. Um, so yeah, it's just been, now I've been here. It's crazy, but I'm going on my 12th year.
That's
So
awesome.
it's pretty good.
So you had 16 years with UTEC. You've been here for 12 years, and then you had a like an in between period, or you went straight from there to here.
Yeah, I had almost a year where I was doing consulting, and during that year I was helping out with Justice Resource Institute. At the time it was called Concord Family Youth Services, and I had given them my plan to, like, hey, continue doing this, and they did a version of what the shelters would look like. But the beauty of it is that UTEC now just got what they're doing, kind of scattered sites where they have apartments where they're now giving opportunities for young people to have a place to live.
Nice.
So it's kind of come full circle to make sure that they get the full services. So yeah, it's been a crazy ride, but it's been fun.
That's really cool, man. So let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
What's it like getting that first grant, drawing everything up to get that? Like
Um,
you had never done it before, so explain to me a little bit about how that came together.
so the funny thing is that we were given a lot of responsibility, right? And I have to give this credit to Kathy Muldoon and Steve Perswick. They both saw the potential of what we can do, and I think at that time we were like 18, 19 year olds going, "We've never done this," and they basically said, "Give it a try." And so I would be lying to you if I said to you that we wrote the grant and it was just like, "Oh, this is easy." No, we had several drafts of trying to
Right, right,
figure it
right.
out. And there were things that for me, there's a big joke because I tend to write a lot about feelings and really expressing what's happening. But in the grant writing world, they're just like, "You have one page, so I need you to chop this down." And so it was hard for us to kind of look at it and go, "Oh, but that's important." That's it. We learned the hard way how to do that. Um, and then we sent out several grants that year before we got this one grant that said yes, and we ended up getting, I think it was $40,000. You would have thought we won the
The
Mega
lotto.
Millions. We
Yeah.
were jumping up and down. We were screaming, "We did it! We did it!" And at the time, it felt like a lot of money. But once you start talking about paying rent and light, and eventually we were all volunteers, but we had to hire an executive director, and we knew I was still in college. Um, so we ended up posting, which is funny. We ended up posting this little ad because we didn't have a lot of money, and it just said executive director wanted, and we just sent it, and we got 3 people, which we were kind of surprised about, but we did. The first two, it was just not gonna work. For us, we knew that we needed somebody that really understood what we were talking about. Like, we need you to listen. Like, we needed someone that understood what it really meant to do youth work. And that's how we got Greg. So Greg came in right from the very beginning. He was one of those people that we were just like, huh, this guy's different. um, and we interviewed him. Everybody felt like, yep, I think this is our guy. We hired him. The thing that sealed the deal was on our first day, we all, which, you know, I think we were all guarded, but we were all waiting for him at the front desk to come in. And we are just staring at him because, you know, to some degree, we were like, oh, what is he going to do to our baby? And we knew that we were basically handing it over to somebody. And Craig walked in with a velour suit. So that was our first kind of like, oh, this is funky, right? And then he walks up to us and he greets everybody, shakes everybody's hand. Um, and we just stared at him. And the thing that got us was that he went into the, what we would call the gym, and he took a little notebook and flipped it open and went to each individual young person, asked them their name, what they wanted. And for us, it was just like he could have easily came in and said, this is what we're going to do. But he did the opposite. And so to see young people being able to give feedback and him like, you know, jotting it down like, okay, we're going to do that. We got to do this. I think all of our shoulders just were like, oh, okay, we got the right guy. I mean, and he's still there, you know? And so, and we went from, if I combine the two first grants of $70,000 to now it's a $17 million organization. I mean, you can't, you know, can't beat that.